Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The sound caught on the glass like a ricochet. One clean crack palmed a cheek, and the sea glass pavilion went silent. String lights trembled in their reflections. Champagne halted midair. Somewhere behind the DJ booth, a gull screamed at the Atlantic as if adding commentary. My left cheek flared hot, then numb, and I tasted salt ocean and blood. I have presented prototypes to rooms full of men who preferred the sound of their own certainty. I have watched rockets hold at T-10 because a sensor disagreed with optimism. I'm not unfamiliar with public failures. I am, however, new to being struck by my own daughter in front of 300 people. 2 weeks earlier, the bell above the door at Bluefinch Cafe rattled the same way it always had, like a jar of screws. The place smells of espresso and orange peel, tiles the color of robin's eggs, a thumbprint of sunlight on the table we've used for college acceptances, first jobs, and arguments that resolve themselves into laughter. I set the leather folder on the marble palm flat to steady the weight of it. "Morning, Mom." Mom Lena said, bright and casual, the way she had been since kindergarten whenever she wanted something impossible. She's 27 now. The impossible had grown expensive. "Let's skip the small talk," I told her, and slid the folder across. "I built something with my life, and I want you to start yours owning part of it, not an allowance. Ownership." She opened the flap with the tip of one nail neat as a surgeon. The documents inside wore their seriousness without apology. The Carter Family Trust, a 40% stake in Carter Quantum Labs dividend projections that would take the panic out of any bank app. I've spent 3 decades shepherding cryogenic hiccups and payrolls, walking patents from idea to market making, certain the people who worked for me had insurance and holidays. NASA taught me about thresholds. Business taught me about weather. This was my weatherproofing for my daughter. "So this is what she asked." Her voice was not hostile, merely distant, the tone of someone holding a sweater at arm's length, checking the care label. "Voting shares through the trust," I said. "You'd receive distributions. You'd have a seat in rooms where decisions are made. If you hate it after a year, we can restructure. But it puts your future in your hands, not in anyone else's." She closed the folder gently and pushed it back like it might smudge her. "I'm happy for you, Mom. Truly. You built a spaceship factory." Her laugh was soft and kind. "But I don't want board packets. I don't want quarterly anything. Tristan and I, we want a life." "Life is not the opposite of a spreadsheet," I said, trying to keep the flint out of my tone. "It is when the spreadsheet belongs to your mother." She smiled as if that softened it. "Don't make it a fight. I've already looked at houses." "Here we are," I said. "The part after 'I'm happy for you' where the price tag appears." She leaned in, eyes bright like a stage light found them. Sunset Ridge Estate. Sonoma. Vine's a main house with these hand-hewn beams, little casitas for guests. "We saw it last month and it felt like..." She stopped herself and shrugged. "It's 28 million. 28. I repeated the way you repeat a number to be sure it has stopped growing. "In cash." "In a transfer," she said, as if that were more polite. "Tristan's trust doesn't unlock until he's 35. He hates it, the strings, the waiting. I don't want to live the next 8 years on layaway. You always told me to pick the life I want and go at it full speed." "I told you to do the work at first," I said. The bell jingled again. A couple drifted in laughing softly. The barista's milk wand shrieked. She watched me, head tilted. Same look she had the day the social worker asked her if she liked the bedroom with the yellow lamp. Lena at 5, all bones, and suspicion trying not to need anything. It is a trick of the heart how you can still see the child inside if you're a grown child. Her elbows in the sleeves of your sweatshirt. Her chin lifted to prove she is a person and not a sentence you're finishing. "Mom," she said, in her tone warm to pleading. "If you want to help us help, not with something tied to your name, with something that's ours." "Ownership is not a leash," I said. "It's a house key." Her smile thinned. "It's your house key. I'm offering you the door," I said. She looked at the folder again and then passed it toward the window where the street was all bright noon and tourists. "You could do it," she said softly. "You could wire it and never worry again. You don't even spend your money." I could have told her about what money has cost me, the sleep I traded for it, the dinners eaten over spreadsheets, the nights I fell asleep in parking lots because the lab wouldn't warm up without my hands. I could have reminded her of every time money did exactly what it's supposed to do, keep a roof overhead and medicine in reach, and of all the times it failed to quiet fear. But she already knew most of that. Kids absorb your weather even when you don't name the storm. "No," I said. "Not because I'm stingy and not because I need control, because I am your mother and my job is to give you something durable. Money that big, that fast is not durable. She considered me as if I were a vendor pitching a service she'd already decided against. You're almost 70, she said. Don't you ever want to, I don't know, breathe? I breathe fine, I said. Better when the air isn't full of smoke. She laughed once, a small disbelieving burst. You always make it about fires. I build the exits first, I said. It's how the people I love get out. She shook her head. Tristan says freedom means not owing your life to anyone's platform. Tristan is welcome to define freedom for himself, I said. He has practice. He was born with a definition wrapped in silk. The barista called a name that wasn't ours. Outside, a tour guide pointed at a historical plaque while a child chased a bubble as if salvation lay inside it. Lena picked up the folder again, read the title page, and let it drop soft as a handkerchief. I'll pass, she said. Give it to a museum. It's not a painting, I said. Exactly. She stood sliding her chair back with a sound the whole cafe heard. I love you. I am grateful for you. I do not want this. What do you want? I asked. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to hear the exact size of it in her voice. 28, she said, already reaching for her phone. Tristan will send the escrow details. I left money for the coffee because dignity travels better with exact change. On the sidewalk, heat rose off the brick in waves. The street smelled like pralines from the shop around the corner and like the river when the tide got bossy. Behind me, the bell rattled again and Lena came out blinking into the noon. You're still coming tomorrow, she asked. The rehearsal was across town, a yacht club with chrome railings and soft ice cream. I always show up when invited, I said. She nodded once. Good. For a beat, we stood there, our shadows touching, if not our hands. A black car eased to the curb. Tristan leaned across the passenger seat to swing the door-open sunglasses on, smile bright, the kind of handsome that has practiced being photographed. He waved cheerful as a billboard. Lena kissed my cheek where no bruise would show and slid into the car. The door shut with expensive patience. They pulled away slow like people with nowhere they needed to be on time. I watched them go until the traffic swallowed the shine and left only exhaust and the sound of the tour guide telling the same story the city had already memorized. Then I went back inside and reclaimed the folder, which felt heavier than it had an hour earlier, though paper has the same weight, regardless of disappointment. 2 weeks later, under glass and string lights, the hand found my face. The room held its breath. I set my champagne flute down so carefully the stem didn't dare tremble. The ocean kept talking. I listened. The Atlantic had a way of answering for people, never directly, always with a shove of wind or a hiss under glass. After the slap, I stood still and let the noise move past me, the way you stand still in a rip current so it spends itself. A week earlier, the rehearsal had smelled like diesel and sugar water. Hale Yacht Club sat on a slice of river where the current pinched all chrome railings and teak decks and men who knew which knot proved you belonged. White jackets ferried trays of scallops and china spoons. A line of pennants ticked the breeze. Lena lifted her bouquet and tried to walk down a makeshift aisle chalked between cocktail tables. She looked lovely, she always did, but her eyes skittered past me as if beauty were easier than contact. Victor Hale, who had perfected the art of speaking with his chin tapped a glass. Friends, he said, we are grateful for what tomorrow represents. I had never met a man who could wring more significance from a pronoun. He raised his flute toward Lena, then toward me, and to Evelyn, whose generosity is already the talk of our little harbor. The room laughed the way a room laughs when it is half confused and eager not to miss the joke. Generosity is a slippery word, I said to no one, mostly to the river. Tristan's hand landed on my elbow. Polite pressure. May we? He asked, already steering. He led me down a corridor paneled with yacht club trophies and photographs in which every woman wore sunglasses big enough to count as alibis. Outside on the deck, the evening pulled pink off the water. A diesel cough from a departing sport fisher hung in the air. If you'll allow it, he began. I want to thank you, Lena and I. This life we're building, it means everything that you see us. His voice had a practiced warmth, the sort that comes with charity banquets and elevator pitches. He moved to the rail and glanced back to be sure the light hit his profile right. I see my daughter, I said. He nodded like a man accepting a compromise he'd designed. Then you understand why we need clean lines, no entanglements. You're brilliant, Evelyn. Everyone knows the rocket stories, but ownership can be burdensome. A generosity with strings attached is a loan. Ownership isn't a string, I said. It's a steering wheel. Steering wheels imply a driver, he said, smiling. We want a road. He leaned closer, lowered his voice so we could share confidentiality as an intimacy. Cut the strings, let her breathe. When love is real, it doesn't need paperwork. Love pays the invoices, I said. Ask any venue manager. He laughed, brief and bright, then let the laugh die so his eyes could look serious. Look, Evelyn, I understand you built something monumental. But Lena shouldn't spend her 20s reading about cryogenic tolerances. She wants to host people, plant vines, wake up to a horizon she chose. If you love her, you give her that horizon. If you love her, I said, you don't make her pick between a horizon and a backbone. The pink on the river cooled to mauve. The pennant stopped ticking and just hung there listening. Tristan let the silence sit until it felt like concurrence. Tomorrow needs to be elegant, he said softly. No sudden turns. He patted the rail. We're among friends. We returned to the party as the band tested a Motown groove. A planner with a headset asked me to approve the position of a small easel that would hold the seating chart. I approved the easel. It had never hurt anyone. At the bar, my phone buzzed. A message from a number labeled Sunset Ridge Team, kindly confirm wire timing for escrow. Harbor and Vale LLC serves as designated intermediary. See attached instructions. There were attachments, 2 PDFs, and a DocuSign link. The sender line read, avernon@harborandvale.com. I had not met A. Vernon. I had not agreed to any wire. Another buzz and NDA for me to sign, referencing speech visibility and brand alignment, both of which seem to have meanings when you are young and looking down a camera. The signature block listed Harbor and Vale LLC again, with a Tallahassee P.O. box and a customer support number that started with 833, which is the country code of optimism. Mason Price, whose name in my phone sits between maintenance, HVAC, and milk, because I file the necessary together, answered on the second ring. Price and Adair, he said, which always sounds to me like a men's clothing store in a wind direction. Off the clock question, I said. How allergic should I be to an escrow request I didn't initiate, a DocuSign I didn't ask for, and an NDA with influencers in the nouns? On a scale of Benadryl to epinephrine, he said, You're not driving, are you? I'm at a party where all the napkins have monograms. Then step into fresh air and text me the documents. Don't sign anything. Don't promise anything. Don't confirm a penny. Where did the email come from? Something called Harbor and Vale. Pretty name for a shell, he said. Send it. I sent it. The river breathed. Back inside, Victor clapped a hand to my shoulder as if steering were his birthright. We'll open with an old family toast, he said, then some light remarks about home and legacy. He smiled paternal and magnanimous. You'll have your moment. I prefer my moments scheduled, I said. They rarely draw blood. He laughed as if I were delightful. In the line for oysters, a woman I'd never met pressed my fingers between both of hers and said, It must feel wonderful to set them up so beautifully. I am rarely short of words. I found none that wouldn't begin an argument. Lena drifted past on Tristan's arm. Her dress was the color of clean paper. When she looked at me, her chin lifted a fraction, the old angle from the day of the yellow lamp. I felt the old urge to earn her gaze back to jury rig radio out of spare wire and make contact over the static. Instead, I nodded once as if we had made a professional agreement about a machine and its tolerances. Later, when the rehearsal surrendered to cocktails, I stepped onto the dark end of the deck and called a number I had saved years before under the word noise. Aria Nguyen picks up every third call and returns the other 2 at 3 a.m. Talk to me, she said. No, hello, just function. I need you to look at a company, I said. Harbor and Vale LLC and the Hales. Corporate filings leans whatever is public in Florida, and anything people pretend is private. Also screenshot the web while the web still says what it says. Mandate. Clear daylight, I said. I'm not trying to ruin anybody. I want to know who's holding the wires. Text me spellings, she said, and relax your shoulders. You clench from the neck. I laughed because she is right and I hate that. I gave her names and the Tallahassee P.O. box and the number with too many 8s. Then I pocketed the phone and watched through the glass my daughter practicing gratitude at the center of a room that was already drafting a story about who had paid for the stems and the spoons and the marigold garlands nested in the hurricane vases. The next morning, makeup artists set up in a suite at the Fairmont and turned ordinary light into something forgiving. I brought coffee because hands do better with a task. Lena's bridesmaids had perfected a chorus of delight. They applauded lashes and zippers and each other. I stood by the window and tried to find the river from this height. It looked like a crease in a bedsheet. Mom, Lena said without turning. Could you steam the veil? The garment bag swallowed it. I steamed the veil. I have kept engineers alive through launch windows. A tool problem is not a problem. When I brought it back, she let me pin the comb, and for a moment I was close enough to smell the faint bitter of hairspray and the citrus of her lotion. Proximity is a form of faith. You look like somebody who knows what she wants, I said. I am somebody who knows what she wants, she said, and the mirror agreed. Downstairs, a van took the wedding party through streets that had decided to be cheerful. Tourists carried plastic cups the size of small potted plants. At Seaglass, the planners moved like stagehands. The quartet tuned in a cluster, their bows ticking the same small square of rhythm until it turned bright. A junior coordinator pointed to my seat at the front, left the one marked Mother of the Bride, and asked if I preferred sparkling or flat. I asked for both because sometimes choice itself is calming. The LED wall at the back of the room cycled through photographs Lena as a toddler with a spoon, Lena in a tutu aimed left of the bar, Lena in a cap and gown with that angle of chin that means the wind in her face is a dare. Tristan floated from group to group and made people feel seen. He is good at it. Victor polished a story with his thumb before setting it down in a circle of men who had their own stories but wanted a better one. I sat and placed my hands palm down on my knees and let the glass roof show me the sky. A text from Mason arrived, just 3 words, received. Eyes open. Another from an unknown number read, Harbor and Vale welcomes your partnership. I turned the phone face down and smoothed the program in my lap as if paper could flatten the air. The quartet shifted to the processional. The doors at the far end opened. Everyone stood. I rose with them and breathed once deep, quiet, unremarkable, and set my shoulders where they belong. When the quartet slid into the processional, the room stood as if the floor itself had been cued. The doors at the far end parted, and Lena came forward on her uncle's arm, Vale breathing with her. Sea glass made cathedrals out of daylight. Even a cloud could look ceremonial when the glass decided it should. She was the kind of beautiful that exhausts camera's sharp, precise nothing for a lens to fix. My hands found each other and stayed still in my lap. The ceremony did what ceremonies do, took simple truths and braided them until they behaved. The officiant's voice had the measured courtesy of someone who'd learned to thread personality between paragraphs. Vows were said in voices that wobbled but did not break. Rings traveled down the line of groomsmen like a story moving through a family growing in detail. People laughed at a line about shared coffee makers. They hummed at a line about weathering storms. I watched Tristan's face as he spoke the part about forsaking all and noted the way his eyes practiced sincerity, the way a swimmer practices distance, competent, trained, almost convincing. When it was done, the room exhaled. They walked back down the aisle to something warm and stringed the quartet working a pop song into a tuxedo. Outside the photographs began Lena between bridesmaids, then pressed to Tristan, then everyone with arms out and laughter too wide. I stood where I was asked, tilted my chin, when told held a bouquet that had the weight of an infant, but none of the demand, and did not let my mouth invent a tremor. The glass roof held a paler sky now. The river had the look of a sheet pulled tight. Cocktail hour poured itself into corners, oysters on ice, a carving station for people who need to watch their dinner. Become dinner a signature drink, named for a private joke. I made conversation with a woman who introduced herself as a brand partner, and who said the word community as if it were both noun and deed. A server offered me a scallop and a spoon, a delicate arrangement that tasted of smoke and butter and the kind of attention that goes into making extravagance appear effortless. Every now and then someone squeezed my arm with both hands and said, "You must be over the moon," and waited for me to confirm. I found synonyms for light and did not write any of them down. The reception room shimmered the way money shimmers when it is pleased by its own decisions. White roses, fat as fists, crystal, that preferred to sing table names printed in a serif that has mistaken itself for heritage. At the back, the LED wall rolled through images of Lena at assorted ages, the spoon, the tutu, the cap and gown, and then unexpectedly an aerial shot of a vineyard stitched into hills, Sunset Ridge. Estate bloomed below it in gold that tried to pretend it had been hand-lettered. A hush that wasn't a hush moved through the room, the little sound people make when narrative is added to dessert. A planner with a headset corrected a napkin fold. The band tucked themselves behind the plexiglass they'd been told would keep sound contained and elegance unruffled. Place cards faced the same direction like soldiers relieved to stand still. My card read Evelyn Carter in a font that made the letters look well-behaved. I took my seat at the head table between a bridesmaid who'd once shared a dorm mini-fridge with Lena and a groomsman who sold software solutions that wanted more than anything to be called platforms. Victor tapped a glass. He did not hurry to speak, as if generosity were best appreciated after a pause. Family, he said, meaning people he knew, and also people he had just met tonight, is about home. He told a story about a childhood on a coast that had always forgiven his mistakes. He said the word legacy, and the room politely accepted it. He turned to me, chin lifted in benediction. And to Evelyn he said, whose example and support remind us that home is not a place you find. It is a gift you give. His smile held the kind of brightness that makes a camera flare. The applause was immediate and grateful, the way applause gets when it is invited to endorse a foregone conclusion. I swallowed water because water is useful. The best man spoke funny in that approved way, a string of anecdotes that allowed Tristan to be the butt of jokes without actually touching him. The maid of honor cried early recovered and landed a line about Lena's stubborn heart that made the room soften. The band gave them small musical bows. The clink of silver was a metronome. Then Lena stood. She held the microphone lightly, as if she were merely borrowing its breath. The dress caught the chandelier's glitter as if it had written an NDA with it. She looked at Tristan first, and whatever her face did then was private. Then she looked out across the table, so many faces organized into circles of muted agreement, and finally she turned her head toward me. "I want to thank my mother," she said, and the room's focus shrugged into place like a coat returned to its rightful shoulders. She raised me when raising me was not the obvious choice. She taught me to wait for the second beep from a satellite, to check the math twice, and then once more to hold my ground when the wind suggested otherwise. The room made that sound again, the small one that says, "This is the part you post." And she taught me generosity. She waited. The pause was not long enough to be a trap and not short enough to be accidental. She let the word hang. "So, tonight," she said, voice clear, eyes dry, "we are thrilled to share the beginning of our next chapter. Tristan and I found a place in Sonoma that feels like the life we want to build. Sunset Ridge. Vines, a house that begs for noise, little guest casitas for the people we love. And we are only able to move forward because my mother." She turned to me and smiled, the exact smile of a girl at 5 who has decided. A lamp is hers, has graciously guaranteed the 8-figure down payment. The room made a larger sound. The LED wall obliged, blooming the vineyard again, then swiping to a rendering of an interior with beams so earnest they seemed to have been carved from nostalgia. Applause erupted. People rose to their feet as if prompted. A woman near the bar dabbed her eyes in a way that made sure her eyes got credit for dabbing. I did not stand. I did not clap. I set my champagne flute on the table and counted silently to 8, because 8 is usually enough to keep glass from adding its opinion. Lena's shoulder loosened. She believed the room, and for a sliver of a second I wished I could too. When the applause thinned, I leaned toward her. My voice didn't travel far. It didn't need to. "That is not true," I said. She kept the smile for the room. "It is now," she said without moving her mouth. I looked at the microphone in her hand, at the way the wire wound under the table like something already connected, and stood. The planner in the headset did not have time to intercept me. I have used conference rooms since before she had a headset. I reached for the second microphone, the one meant for the toast after the cake, and nodded to the band to lower themselves. They obligingly took a knee, musically speaking. "May I clarify something?" I said. The sound system liked my voice. It gave it back to me round and untroubled. "I have not guaranteed any down payment. I have not promised any wire. What I offered my daughter is ownership 40% of my company through the family trust. That offer stands. Cash does not. Silence has its own tone. This one wore cut crystal, and the faint ring of an insult refused entry. Somewhere in the back, a chair leg adjusted its expectations against the floor. The LED wall froze on a photograph of a vineyard path and then dimmed as if the vineyard itself had lost power. Tristan rose in a smooth rehearsal of concern. "Evelyn," he said, microphoneless, but certain he would be heard, "this isn't the time." The time happened when a falsehood was announced to 300 people, I said, not raising my voice. "It is, however, still the place." "Let's discuss this privately," he said. Palms out, which is the international sign for "I'm about to appear reasonable." The room waited for the room to decide. Faces, so many willing faces, shifted from me to Lena to Tristan to Victor, searching for the one that would provide the line they could keep for later. Lena's smile did not drop so much as dissolve. She looked at me the way a person looks at a closed door they had been told would open. "You're humiliating me," she whispered, and though the microphone stayed by her side, the words carried. "I'm correcting the record," I said. "You said it." Her face changed then, quick as a sun ducking in and out of cloud. She stepped the 2 steps between us, and with the same hand that once held a dandelion under my chin to check for something called joy, she struck me. The sound was percussive and short. Glass quivered. A fork gave up its balance and lay down. I kept my feet because I have learned to keep my feet, and I set the microphone carefully on the tablecloth so it would not roll. For a moment, too, perhaps the room was a painting of itself. Tristan reaching Victor, starting a smile that forgot its assignment, the maid of honor. With her mouth in the shape of a word that didn't arrive, the planner putting a hand to her headset, as if she could speak correction into the past. Then the room remembered that time moves forward. A security man in a suit that preferred the word protection to waiter reached our table. His face held the professional regret of someone whose job is to remove the problem without naming it. "Ma'am," he said to me gently, "the family would like a moment. We'll escort you to the lobby." "I am the family," I said, and it came out without heat. "But I can take a walk." "Thank you," he said, the way you thank a person who has decided not to make your night harder. Tristan took Lena's wrist. "Hey," he said, soft enough that softness could be put on a resume. "We're okay." She shook him off without looking. Mascara had made a choice along her cheek. The LED wall, exhausted by symbolism, settled on an image of the river. I lifted my clutch and my shawl and left my flute exactly where it was. As I turned, I heard Victor clear his throat by the bandstand. "Friends," he said, already running a comb through the crowd. "Let us remember tonight is about love." The band found a key and sat in it. Servers began to move as if choreography could cauterize. The security man in his echo led me through a side corridor lined with palms that had never seen dust. As we passed the coat check, a woman I did not recognize murmured, "Oh, brave, so brave," and a man I had never met said, "There's always one." The lobby managed to be both airy and small. A wall of glass gave the river its own invitation. Outside, the wind had pushed the water into a mood. At the valet desk, a young man held out a ticket I had not yet requested. "Ms. Carter," he said. "Your car?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He nodded. "Of course." I stepped outside. The air smelled like salt, and whatever the kitchen was pan-searing. The string lights along the pavilion roof hummed. In the distance, a tugboat shouldered a barge upriver, steady and unstylish, and inarguably useful. People said things as they left to smoke. Such a shame, and it's always complicated with mothers, and they'll laugh about this someday, as if laughter could be printed and saved. I pressed my palm to my cheek. Heat still lived there, but less personally. Through the glass, the party's color kept moving silk and black wool and the particular shine of hired joy. Somewhere toward the back, someone began the chant for cake the way crowds do when they need something harmless to do together. When I turned to go, the security man had stayed a respectful distance, arms folded in the exact equation of neutral. "Take your time," he said. He meant it, which is rare. I nodded and walked the length of the colonnade, fingertips skimming the cool rail. On the last column, a hairline crack ran, from base to capital, an old fracture that had learned not to travel. I put my finger on it and felt the small, cool honesty of stone. Then I let my hand fall and the river took the rest of the sound. My finger left the cool seam in the column, and my phone trembled one short buzz, then another. Aria pulled Sunbiz filings. Harbor and Vale LC formed 18 months ago. Manager A. Vernon mail drop in Tallahassee. Cross-referenced liens on Hale entities. A thicket. Sending packet. A second message stacked beneath it. Also seeing DocuSign envelope where you guarantee escrow. Signature block misspells your middle name. Font swap mid-sentence. Amateur hour. I sent the messages to Mason without commentary. He replied with a blue bubble that looked like a shrug made of law on it. Do not engage further. Preserving. Inside the glass, the party redistributed itself into something that could be photographed. Outside, the river kept its own record. I walked to the curb and asked the valet for my car. He handed me the keys with the politeness of someone who has watched 100 nights tilt. By morning, the packet sat in my inbox, neat as a lab bench. Florida corporate filings, uniform commercial. Code, financing, statements. Screenshots of a Harbor and Vale escrow. Instructions PDF with routing and account numbers registered to a small bank that had recently merged and mislaid its personality. There were emails from an address that wanted to sound like an office accounts at Harbor and Vale and read like a person. Capital letters, unnecessary urgency, a fondness for the phrase as discussed. There was also a credit application for an additional cardholder on an account I did not own. My name spelled correctly there, my birthdate guessed and wrong by 2 days. Aria had circled the mismatch like a teacher still trying to save a semester. I forwarded the packet to Mason, and then, because I understood the value of plain daylight, I asked Lena to meet me at Blue Finch. She arrived in sunglasses too large for the room. The bell gave its rattly verdict. She took the seat across from me and set her phone face down like a boundary. For a moment, we listened to the cafe behave, milk wands, lids snapping onto cups, a chair scraping the kind of scrape everyone forgives. "I don't want to fight," she said. "I don't have one to sell," I said, and slid the folder across. She opened it with the same neat care she'd used 2 weeks earlier. The first page bore Harbor and Vale on a faux engraved header. Below, the guarantee of funds offered my middle initial to the altar of sloppiness, and then switched fonts to Times New Roman as if trying on someone else's shoes. She studied it and blinked the way a person blinks when their eyes tell them a story their mind hasn't ordered. "That's not your signature," she said finally. "No," I said. "It is my name as imagined by a person who thinks fonts are disguises." She turned a page. The email thread read like theater per our call with Evelyn. As Ms. Carter assured, "We appreciate promptness given sellers multiple offers." She moved to the credit application and went still. I didn't. Tristan set up all the travel. He said it was easier if he handled logistics. "Easier," I said, a word with wide ambitions. Her jaw tightened. "You're implying he—" She stopped. The word fell apart in her mouth, its letters like loose screws. I lifted my phone and pressed play on a recording Aria had delivered with the packet. Vendor line quality, a woman's voice thick with the afternoon saying, "We'll need the remaining deposit before rehearsal." A man Tristan friendly as an invoice. "Evelyn Carter is wiring. She's given verbal authorization." The woman, "We'll need something in writing." Tristan, "You'll have a PDF in 10. then a click that seemed to end more than a call. Lena leaned back as if distance could make the sound change its meaning. She put a hand to the bridge of her nose and let her sunglasses rest there like a small roof. He told me you'd offered, she said, each word a card laid carefully on felt. He said you were just being difficult in public because you hate him. I did not say I did not hate him. I did not say anything. I waited while the shape of the thing rearranged itself in her head to match the shape of the thing on the page. You knew, she said, not as an accusation but as an inventory, last night. You already knew. I knew enough, I said. She closed the folder and placed both hands on top of it, palm to palm, as if prayer might be a muscle memory. When she took them away, there was a damp oval on the leather where her left hand had been. She reached for her phone, then reconsidered and left it face down, a small refusal. Mason slid into the chair beside me, a few minutes later, smelling faintly of scorched espresso and copier fuser. He nodded at Lena, then at the folder, then at me. Bank's fraud team is awake, he said. They're good at this. They'll place holds where they can. The rest is paperwork that knows the route. Lena's voice had frayed, but it held. Is this criminal? Falsifying financial guarantees, misrepresenting a guarantor to induce transfer, applying for credit with someone else's identifiers, he said, ticking the phrases like a metronome that kept its own counsel. Those words exist for a reason. She stared at the thumbprint of sunlight that lands on our table every day at 11. I believed him, she said, as if reporting a weather condition. We walked her through the documents without embroidery. She asked for copies, and I said yes. She asked for water, and I fetched it because hands do better when they carry something. When she stood to leave, she hugged me with the mechanics of someone relearning a habit, one small adjustment at a time. By Tuesday, the bank's emails had settled into a bad rhythm. We have identified unusual activity. We have initiated chargeback procedures. We have received a request for cancellation from the vendor. The travel agency that had constructed an itinerary like a Braga harvest festival in Saint-Emilion, 2 nights, cantilevered over Amalfi Suites, that apologized for nothing, sent a brittle note about unable to verify a ranger identity, and suspending services pending outcome. A different vendor, less mannered, simply wrote, "Tell your son-in-law to stop using your name on his phone calls." Arya appended the note with a smiley I pretended not to see. The knock came early on a day that had not yet admitted to being morning. Lena told me later 3 people at the door, windbreakers without wind faces that had learned to be neutral. They asked her name and showed her paper. They asked if Tristan was home. He was barefoot, bright with indignation, robe tied with the confidence of someone who believed fabric could protect him from tasks. They spoke to him as if he were dangerous only to his schedule. Paper changed hands, drawers opened. A laptop hummed its last hum before being uninvited from its own passwords. Tristan tried the voice he used for donors and seating charts. It did not interest them. He tried anger next, faster, louder, the kind that assumes volume divides a bill. Then he tried Lena. Watching him do it, she told me, hurt worse than seeing the robe. He said she had misunderstood everything. He said she had wanted the vineyard more than he had. He said we as both shield and sword. She asked to call her lawyer. She called Mason. She called me. When I arrived, a woman with a badge the size of a coaster met me in the hallway and asked if I was okay. It is not a question in the cosmic sense. It is inventory. I said yes because gravity did not need my drama, and because Lena was in the living room answering questions with a steadiness that did not ask for accompaniment. Tristan sat on the edge of a chair as if posing for a portrait he had not agreed to. He did not look at me. Victor, who had made it across town faster than dignity allows, texted Lena 3 paragraphs about misunderstandings and overreach in family. She did not respond. When they stood, the room shifted. They cuffed Tristan with more care than he had offered anyone all month. He spoke loudly then so the building could hear him be wronged. The elevator dinged the way elevators ding, immune to narrative. A neighbor opened her door and watched the kind of watching that promises a phone call to someone who already knows. After they left the living room, held its breath the way a room does when a noise finally ends. Lena sat on the rug, not crying, not anything, just there, a person occupying her own floor. I made tea because steam is an old companion and because cups give hands the same small purpose water does. Mason came by the apartment later with a file folder whose heft meant he had done the thing he does when clocks are uncooperative. He spoke in sentences that did not require bravery to answer. He did not offer the future. He offered form. Forms have the mercy of lines to write on. The day unfolded in small acts. A florist called to ask where to send a bill. I gave them an address that would return it. A blogger published a photo of me by the Pavilion column with the caption, "Mother of the bride leaves early." A commenter typed boundaries, and one typed money changes people, and both believed they were right. Someone from the yacht club emailed a link to a gallery and a note about memories, a word that tries too hard. In the evening, Lena came to Blue Finch. The bell made its faithful jar of screws sound. She did not wear sunglasses. She carried nothing but keys and a phone she didn't touch. When she sat, the chair accepted her as if it had been saving her place. We did not rehearse apologies. We poured them into the spaces between the ordinary. I signed a lot of nothing the last few months, she said. Influencer agreements, NDAs about photos, brand partner things. It felt like popularity disguised as paperwork. She swallowed. I let him be the adult in rooms I was in. We watched the small noon light find the table. Outside, a tour group moved past, and a child lost a mitten and found it again, astonished that loss could reverse itself with such a simple act as looking down. Lena slid the folder back toward me. I'll read it all again later, she said. Right now I want to drink this while it's hot. We did that. When we stood, the bell rattled us out like screws in a coffee can, familiar, imperfect, dependable. On the sidewalk, the brick held the day's heat. The river turned a corner and kept going. By winter, the river went still and quiet, a flat blade under the glass. Bluefinch learned a new pastry case and kept the old bell. We sat at our table again, coats unbuttoned, cups giving off the kind of steam that asks you to wait a beat before you drink. Paper had done what paper does. Dockets, filings, countersigned forms. Tristan stood before a federal judge who preferred complete sentences. Wire fraud and identity theft took on their usual meanings. 18 months. Restitution where restitution could be counted. Harbor and Vale dissolved without ceremony. Victor's companies went to auction in a room that smelled like carpet cleaner and hurry. The vineyard in Sonoma appeared on a real estate page with photographs that made it look as if it had never promised anyone anything. Lena worked mornings at a warehouse that stacked hunger into boxes and unstacked it back into neighborhoods. Evenings she sat at a long table with a notebook and a calculator under fluorescent lights and learned how numbers behave when they're honest. She arrived early everywhere. She stopped wearing sunglasses indoors. I set a folder on the marble. No theatrics, no speech, the tab read Stewardship Trust. Inside, documents with the unflashy muscle of specificity. 52% voting stake in Carter Quantum Labs. Transfer restricted for 5 years. Distributions according to schedule, a clause about the ethics that had nothing to prove. 2 trustees besides her, Mason for law, and Dana Chu for operations until the first anniversary, when a third seat would be hers to fill with someone whose questions she did not mind answering. She flipped pages with her thumb lips moving just enough to count sections she wanted to remember. It's more than you offered, before she said. It's what the company needs, I said, and what I can hand you without feeling like I've thrown you into a river. Her smile tugged left the way it used to when she cracked a code in algebra and pretended she hadn't enjoyed it. I read the last 3 board packets, she said, twice. I know, I said. You emailed questions at 4 a.m. They were good questions, she said. They were. She signed where tabs asked her to. The pen bled a little on the heavy paper. The lines took it. When she slid the folder back, it was heavier for having said yes. I added my signature where the trust required me and closed it with the kind of pressure that makes a binder stop thinking about springing open. I don't know how to be you, she said, not apologizing, not asking permission. You don't need to be, I said. The lab prefers new problems. She reached into her bag and set a small object on the table. An old keycard edges scuffed the picture of me in a blouse I'd retired. Someone had stuck a translucent star over the photo years ago. The point had worn off. You left this in the foyer, she said. It still gets past the first door, I said. I know, she said. I tried it. We finished our coffee. The bell led us out to a day that had decided on sun. On the sidewalk, a delivery truck idled with its back open, a small staircase lowered to the curb. A man carried flats of greens down one, balanced on his shoulder like a careful dare. Across the street, a class of children in identical jackets followed a guide with a small flag through a history they hadn't voted for. At the lab, the receptionist looked up and then stood surprised into a smile. I handed over the old keycard and watched her scan it. The reader flickered green patient as a clock. Dana came down the hall at a trot, notes tucked under her arm, her face doing the kind of math that inventories expressions before choosing one. She shook Lena's hand like a colleague's and steered us toward the conference room where the whiteboard keeps its secrets until asked politely. Names went around the table. Questions followed supply timelines. A design review moved forward a week because a vendor finally answered a personnel issue that wasn't. Lena listened, then asked about a tolerance range 1/4 millimeter too generous for what the assembly line wanted to tolerate. Heads turned. Someone made a mark on the board. The mark stayed. At the end, people stood with the comfortable shuffle of a meeting that has been useful. I left them there by design. In the hallway, the glass showed the river thinner now and bright. On the way back to the cafe to retrieve nothing in particular, we took the long route along the water. Gulls worked the wind. A tug nosed a barge under the bridge like a patient dog. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The folder under Lena's arm made no sound at all. At the corner, the light changed. We crossed with everyone else, coats opening a little when the sun found them. The bell at Bluefinch rattled as someone went in ahead of us, familiar, imperfect, dependable. We reached for the door at the same time, and the glass gave back two reflections that looked related. Then it gave us a room that already knew our names. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.